Welcome to the Best Damn Sports Show podcast. I am Best Damn Sports Show producer Jason Cahill, and I'm joined today by founder of Deadspin.com, Will Leitch. Will, thanks for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me, sir.
So first off, your first appearance, hopefully not the last on Best Damn Sports Show. How'd you like it?
Well, after having some recent experiences where dialogue was not necessarily what the emphasis was.
I can't imagine what you're referring to.
It was nice to. I find it surprising as someone that's been a long time fan of some people's journalism to find that the incisive questions actually came from John Calipari today. So.
I was saying to you earlier, I got worried a little bit. He was like Best Damn's Buzz Bissinger at the beginning there.
It was great though.
He got right in, but yeah, it was an intelligent, thoughtful discussion.
It was a question that required an answer that was listened to. Yeah. That's always nice.
Always nice, right? So good. So you had fun. Well, let's talk a little bit about Costas. You know, I'm curious what went on behind the scenes that we didn't see. So before the segment starts, are you just chatting away in the green room with Buzz, and is he shaking your hand? Is he saying hello? Hey, I'm a big admirer. Or
well, I was in the green room with David Hershey, who's the editor of my book Outside the Fan, and David knows he's a little bit more in contact with the media world than I am. I tend to keep.
By the way, I'll stop you right there. Guess who I sat next to at the Super Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona?
David Hershey?
David Hershey.
David Hershey and Roger Director?
That's correct.
Oh, Director was probably losing his mind.
I can't imagine. I had to move at halftime because sitting next to Roger Director, who is, for those who don't know Roger Director, probably the biggest Giants fan I would think
he wrote
on
the book
planet.
I Dream in Blue.
Exactly. So I'm sitting next to him, Giants-Patriots, and he is insane watching this game.
He's a crazy man. I did a reading with him one time, and I made the mistake of having him go on first. Afterwards, there was no energy. It was gone out of the room. It was like going on stage after Prince or something.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, but so I was in the green room with David, and we met a few people. I met Michael Wilbon, who says that he reads the site and is a very, very smart guy, very cool guy. And I talked to, and there are other people that I think maybe were a little bit more distant, but I wasn't really in there to meet people. David kind of does that a little bit better than I do. But I did want to introduce myself to Mr. Bissinger, and so we did. I shook his hand. He kind of looked down, and he seemed to have. He seemed not interested in making pleasantries, which, frankly, considering what happened, I actually respect that. I actually respect that there was no hey, we're buddy pal in the green room, and the attack and the kind of attack that came on the show. I think I say what you will about Buzz, and frankly, I'd like to just make it very clear that I think Buzz Bissinger is an incredible journalist and a wonderful writer, and there's nothing that happened on Costas now that changed that opinion at all. But say whatever your thoughts. That was not theater. Those were his.
You know what I liken it to? He was like a wrestler, and he heard the opening bell and immediately went for the folding chair, picked it up, and hit you over the head.
Yeah, and it was funny because when I realized. It was pretty clear from the get-go the way this was probably going to go, and and it's funny. There's been some discussion on blogs and some other places today as to whether or not I should have called him a jerk too or something. And to me, listen, I know how YouTube works, okay? And I knew this would be all over YouTube. The minute this started, I was I knew this was going to be all over YouTube today. So to me, there's no real need in that situation. It worried me about him, frankly, a little bit, and I mean that in all sincerity, and not in some kind of snarky way. He's a wonderful writer and extremely talented, but. I don't, as much as I believe sports blogs are powerful things that can do a lot of important things, I don't know if sports blogs can actually get anyone that fired up. I think there had to have been something else going on there.
Now, you're a big Cardinals fan, so are you going to go home now and burn all your copies of 3 Nights in August?
No, though it was funny. I told because I actually got the book for my father 2 or 3 Father's Days ago. I got that for him for Father's Day, and because it's a book and not a natural light, Dad didn't open it. But he hasn't read my book either. But Dad was like, I'm gonna burn that guy's book. I was like, no, Dad, you should read it. It's a really good book. To me, it's funny. I think it's sort of based in this general kind of idea that of course this is going to be scary for guys like that. Of course, he's been doing things a certain way and doing them fantastically for a really long time, and he takes his work very seriously. All of a sudden, this new thing is kind of happening that he doesn't quite understand. He doesn't have a lot of control over, and it's just kind of outside his frame of reference. And to me, it's a shame that he didn't take the time to, kind of see that, there's some pretty, whether you like Deadspin or not, there's some fantastic stuff on the web and some really well thought out, very well put together things. And it's a shame that, it's funny, it's a shame in both regards, because I think Buzz Bissinger could benefit from reading some of the great sports blogs. And I also think, frankly, a lot of sports bloggers could benefit from reading some of Buzz Bissinger's books. But after last night, I don't think either one of those things is ever going to happen.
Fair enough. Moving on, let's talk about Deadspin for a bit. So some of the stuff that we didn't get to talk to on Best Damn today, we'll cover now, and in no particular order. Let's talk about, have you heard any feedback from any of the athletes or coaches that you've put on your site, whether or not hey, I saw that, I thought it was pretty funny, or hey, I'd prefer you not have included me in that?
I hear from media a lot. I don't typically hear from athletes or coaches, frankly, because coaches they don't have time. realize that a key factor in this is that coaches and athletes are. I mean no offense to the media by saying this, but they're a little busier than media are. Famously, a friend of mine that's a reporter was talking to Bruce Weber, the coach of my beloved Illinois Fighting Illini, and he was saying, the editor of one of the largest sports blogs is a huge Illini fan. And he writes all these things about how he defends you and loves what you're doing over there. And he was like, I'm sorry, what's a blog? and I have how can I possibly have a problem with that?
Well, you heard what Coach Cal today said on the show. He doesn't really use computers.
Of course, and honestly, why should he? He's frankly, these are college basketball coaches. I'm sure they're on the phone all the time anyway. They don't have time to work on it anyway. I think that, so I tend to, the only time there's ever been an actual reaction from an athlete to photos, I think, was Kyle Orton. We famously had, I think, the first
of the many athletes in drunken pose shots.
The first of these occasional athletes in drunken shots.
Yes.
And he basically, he was just, he was drinking a Jack Daniels or something, and he looked like he was having a good time. And it's not like,
well, really, if you're Kyle Orton, why would you not be having a good time?
Yeah, because at the time he was actually, this is back when he was starting, and they were in first place at the time before the Rex Grossman era began in force. And it was fun because he was asked about it by Sports Illustrated about 6 months later, and he was like, "Listen, those guys didn't like the caption didn't say, 'Boy, look at this jerk. I don't like this guy anymore.' He's like, 'Listen, it was my day off. I wasn't driving home. Someone does to take a picture and put it on the web. I got nothing to be ashamed of. I'm a 22-year-old guy out having fun.'" And it's very possible I'm wrong on these things, but certainly I think the majority of athletes themselves actually do think that. Now, they may have things that they have to lose. They may be worried about endorsement contracts or the coaches being mad at them or so on. But at their core, I don't think it's considered that big of a deal. It's the money side of it when people start actually, it's the people outside of that. It's funny when we were talking about that in the show. I don't know if I quite got that across to Mr. Calipari, is that the idea, of course, yeah, this is sports. Everyone is all trying to make money. We live in America, and that's kind of what we do here. And it's not a matter of that. It's not saying that somehow there's something, Ben Roethlisberger shouldn't be able to make ads because he also drinks. That's in fact, it's the opposite of that. It's the idea that I think the people that tend to get upset about those photos are actually the handlers of the athletes, or the people that have money to be made off some sort of manufactured image that, frankly, I don't think the majority of sports fans actually really believe anymore. And I don't think that's people act as if that's the myth is demolished. Well, yeah, it is, and the myth was ridiculous in the first place. I don't think, as I mentioned on the show, no one looks at a photo of Kyle Orton like that and is like, man, I can't root for that guy anymore. It's like he's a regular human being. And I think this whole kind of notion where we try to pretend that athletes are something other than human beings, that's when you see people freaking out because Josh Howard says he smokes pot in the off season. I guarantee you there are a lot of, if you are kidding yourselves if you think a lot of the athletes that were writing, a lot of the media that were writing about Josh Howard smoking pot in the off season do not smoke pot at some point during a year.
By the way, I am shocked to hear that any athlete has ever smoked marijuana.
Yeah.
I don't believe
And that's
it
the
for a
realize
second.
this is what happens when we have this notion where we don't allow athletes to be real people. You have Josh Howard getting in trouble not for smoking pot in the off season, but for actually being honest and saying he smokes pot in the off season. That was his dumb move. And people act as if like it's funny because yes, I will confess there is an this is not this big altruistic show the hypocrisy of the media scene when we put one of these pictures up. They're supposed to be funny, but certainly I think that it does speak to like they're funny because we don't. It's one of the few times we ever see any of these athletes as real people, and I don't think anyone's ever. I just cannot fathom a situation where someone sees one of those pictures, sees Matt Leinart drinking in a hot tub, and is like, "Wow, man, that's crazy. He should be in the film room." I don't think we don't. They're not robots.
You do realize, by the way, that there are shows. I won't name names that actually get a majority of their content from your website.
I think I have no problem with that. I've never.
I mean, do you watch TV and think to yourself, "Wow, I wonder where they got that story"? Oh, and look, I wonder where they got that story.
You know, it does pop up occasionally, but you know that's fine. If I find something interesting enough to put on the site, right. I want as many people to see it as possible. Yeah, so by the way, I don't feel like it's not like I own it. So
yeah, best damn being one of those shows.
Of course, and I think it's great. Like I think it's funny, and I think this actually goes back to the Bissinger idea. I think that I do think not Deadspin specifically, but blogs in general are helping change sports coverage a little bit. I think there is what people would consider a downside of it, of that like all of a sudden everything's salacious and gossip. So I don't actually think that's the case, but I think you do see some things slipping in on that. I'm not sure 5 years ago that the Roger Clemens thing is covered with the vigor. Of course, realize this was happening 5 years ago, and most people knew about it then. It's just all of a sudden nobody likes Roger Clemens anymore. So he's fair game now. But so it's become a pile-on type thing. But I think generally speaking, the idea of actually talking on a normal level to fans. As opposed to we are of this higher thing explaining things for you. I think that's a very positive thing ultimately for sports coverage.
So one last question about Deadspin, then we'll move on to the book. One of the questions that we were talking about earlier today, me and a bunch of the other producers, we are curious, how much money does a blogger make? I won't ask you to give me an exact figure. I guess you can tell me whether or not you will be receiving your tax refund from the U.S. government this year.
Well, I'm fortunate. I'm fortunate because I actually I'm employed by Gawker Media, which does a series of sites like Gawker and Defamer and so on. And so I don't have to worry about ads. I'm actually a salaried employee and have been since the site started, which I think is actually one of the keys to its success. It's not so much that I'm like brilliant or anything. It's just I was able to devote myself full time to it. So I'm fortunate that that I'm a salaried employee to do this site. Most bloggers are not so fortunate. They actually have to sell the ads themselves. And I will say that as I was talking to Mr. Sally beforehand, if I were in charge of selling the ads on Deadspin, we could have 100 million people a day on the site, and there would be no ads because I have no idea how to do that. So, but most bloggers actually that want to make this a full-time thing have to be more entrepreneurial about it. And I think that their ceiling, if a site, I mean, there's Matthew Cerrone does this great site called Mets Blog. It's purely devoted to the Mets. He does this full time. A site that's just for the Mets. I don't know how much money he makes, but he doesn't have to worry. Earns a living. And like to me, I think that I think that also in a way is also scary to a lot of people. You have to realize that a lot of the one of the main reasons that you're seeing so many talented people writing on the web is because Bill Simmons from ESPN famously put this. What, he was going to go sit and copy at the sports desk of the Boston Herald till he was 42 and wait for someone to die? And that's, I mean, so much of newspaper journalism has always kind of been, it doesn't, and it's not specific to sports, it often does not encourage new voices. And so when the web came along and all these talented people, and then also people like me, were like, wow, I really want to, I want.
By the way, I like that self-deprecating move where you did not include yourself
of course,
amongst
I want to make
the
that
talented.
Clear. I want to make that clear. And but you saw a lot of people that didn't, that no one was going to see what they could possibly do. And no one could see what they could add to anything, or if they had, or they weren't able to develop their voice. Like I was writing online and writing for newspapers and magazines long before Deadspin about things other than sports, and so it's always a little strange for me sometimes to be considered I think one thing that's maybe a little bit off is in perception is the idea that, like, this is like my big money-making scheme. Like, I'm a writer, and sure, obviously I want more people to see the site. But the initial idea of doing the site was I was hoping more people could see my writing. I was hoping to be able to expand to a larger thing, and I've been fortunate enough to have that, where I'm able to write for the New York Times regularly in New York, and now with the book, with the next book, and which they said was the fourth book, by the way, on the show. It's actually the third book, because there's a fourth book, but I'm just way behind on it. So, but I'm fortunate to be able to do that, and the reason that's happened is because it's not because people are like, wow, we can transform this Deadspin thing into a book. It's like, wow, there's actually an original voice going on here, and he has the discipline to write a book, which is very difficult.
So one of the questions we didn't get to ask you about the book on the show, you have a story in there about Robert Tractor Trailer.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
Well, I originally, long back in a former life, I actually was what we'd consider a conventional sports reporter. I covered the Illinois men's basketball teams and football teams for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And I'm originally from a very happy Midwesterner and a kind of adrift in Brooklyn. And I was covering the Illinois team, and they did not have a good year that year. It was toward the end of Lou Hinson's era there. And they played Michigan, and Robert Trailer dominated the game. He was clearly the guy that we all had to talk to. And of course, you know, if you've been to a press box and locker room, particularly in college, there's just kind of this like death march from all the reporters, just kind of like all get in a row, and they all go down with their notebooks, and they're escorted by sports information into the locker room, and they talk to the player, whatever play they need to get. And Trailer was there, and he was just wearing a towel. And of course, you know, when you interview athletes in the locker room, you know, obviously you're gonna see some naked people, but it was funny because he was wearing the towel, and everyone needed to go talk to him, so everyone kind of gathered around, and I was new, so I was kind of at the wrong side of the circle, and so the minute everyone kind of all circled around him, he took off his towel. It was a power move. Like, the idea was that, like, wait a second, you guys, like here's Robert Trailer, 20 years old, 19, 20 years old, and all these middle-aged sports writers that have been doing the same job for 20 years, just kind of dutifully going through the paces, all gathered around him to interview him, and and Trailer, to his credit, was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And he saw it, and so he's just like, he took off the towel. He's like, all right, what do you guys got? and everyone just sat there and just went through their jobs, and just like, he's just blatantly legs spread, like, clearly. It'd be different. Like, interviewing athletes naked is one thing, but it's clearly this. You know what? Screw all of you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and whip out the hog here, and you are just gonna have to accept it and interview me and go about your jobs. And he was right. And I was like, you know, man, there's something about this power. Am I aspiring to this? Like, is this really what I want to do for the next 20 years? And fortunately, the web came along, and I was able to take it a little bit different tack.
See, you should have done that on Costas last night.
Yeah.
You should have done the same thing.
That would have been awesome if the green room would have had a locker room.
What the hell would Buzz have said to that?
You know, that is, to truly even the scales in the world of in the interaction. This is one of the panels I talked about in Costas last night, was how the interaction between athletes and reporters. If they were really to truly do it, I think before every game, all the press should have to get dressed in the same locker room, and the players should just be able to go around and sit and point and laugh. I think that might be a way to actually even all this out.
Well, there you go. That's a good idea.
I only say that because I don't go to the locker room anymore.
Let's get Roger Goodell on the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's make sure Aaron Andrews is there as well.
Yeah, and Mitch Albom. Oh, wait, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
All right, well, Will, thanks for joining us on
course.
the podcast today. Everybody go out and get your copy of God Save the Fan. And if you haven't already, check out Deadspin.com, which is a fantastic site and gives us some of our content on this show.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks for doing it, Will.
Of course, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Best Damn Sports Show podcast. Thanks again.